What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen by another human? Story 1. Not creepy, but I knew a 14-yo who was helping his dad drywall a home. The kid looked at the shape of a staircase, looked at the drywall on the horses ready to cut, looked back at the staircase, then cut the drywall without a single measurement or marking. The drywall fit the staircase so perfectly it slid into place like it was snuggling the stairs. Not a single measurement. Story 2. I worked with someone briefly when I worked for the police. He came to my team to get frontline experience for promotion. He'd been in a secretive investigation unit before coming to us. I'll call him Dave. We went into this area with loads of gang-on-gang violence, and we were enforcing a Section 60 stop for weapons after a nasty murder in the area. We stopped 2 men at the side of the street, and it was immediately obvious they had nothing to do with any of it. We chatted for a bit, and that was it, or so I thought. Dave, being incredibly polite and friendly, said to one of the men, "I think I know you." The man said that he didn't. He'd never been in trouble with the police, never been arrested, never gets in any bother whatsoever. He was in his 30s, this fella. Dave said, "I do know you. Let me have a look at you." The man was good-natured about it, even though I was feeling bloody awkward. "I've never been in any trouble," said the man. Dave looked at him and said, "I believe you haven't. Your dad did, though." He calls the man by his name, his date of birth, his old address, his mom's name and date of birth, and his dad's details, too. Dave says that 22 years previously, he'd attended at the bloke's house when he was a pre-teen because his parents were arguing and his dad was drunk. His dad was arrested for a minor sleep-it-off breach of the peace. He wasn't a regular criminal or anything like that. Dave had not only recognized the guy, but he'd done it from when he was a child, aged him, and remembered every bloody detail for a minor thing over 20 years previous. No wonder he was in the high-end investigation units. Genius. Story 3. Just the first time I witnessed someone with a special interest in real life. Was a school assistant and had been asked to walk around outside the school with a specific 13-year-old kid who needed a 10-minute stress relief break. It was a school for kids with anxiety and depression. Anyway, we are walking and a plane goes by overhead pretty low to the ground. In a super casual tone of voice, that kid starts telling me the heading of the plane, which airport it came out of based on how low it was, and its probable flight number and destination. I was like 0_0. Story 4. In real life, my sister hands down, and it's an ongoing thing. You remember that scene in The Matrix where Carrie-Anne Moss downloads helicopter flight knowledge into her brain? Watching my sister just go about her daily life is like a never-ending loop of that scene. Dishwasher is broken? 10 literal minutes of YouTube later, she's got it figured out. The what, the how, the why, and it'll be fixed in half an hour if the parts are in stock at Lowe's. Car making a funny noise? Get her on FaceTime, pop the hood, crank the engine, and she's got it located and ID'd, and estimates from 3 local shops for you to pick from. Random archaeological discovery mentioned in passing on the daily MSN headlines. She read the journal article already. And isn't it interesting how that validates so-and-so's findings from his dig in Chile in the 80s? Since when do you know about fossils? Crazy complicated super esoteric recipe from Thailand she's never tried? I'll bet you $1,000 she'll glance at the recipe twice and whip out a version you could sell in a restaurant. She remembers your coworker's sister's boyfriend's birthday and that he really likes chocolate sprinkles but not rainbow. She can get a feral dog eating out of her hand and get it to let her give it a bath and diagnose what's wrong with its back leg from 10 paces away. Hey, sis, do you happen to know anything about welding? How to preserve this old dress I found in great-grandma's attic? What I should do about these weird bugs on my tomato plants? Of course you do. Her bosses at work keep trying to move her up the chain, but she's not interested because it'll cut into her jam-making time or something. But they all come to her first when there's a question or a problem they can't fix. And they listen on the first go. Her husband says he's seen her ask the general manager what flavor of stupid he ate for breakfast this morning and seen him apologize for the error in judgment. She'll tell you she's not that smart, she just has a good memory. But IDK, man, it's terribly handy to have her on my side. But if she ever decides to take over the world, we're all screwed. Story 5. My ex remotely took over the computers of 7 people using the same Wi-Fi and was able to make it look like the illegal images he was looking at were never on his computer. We lived in a duplex and they let us use their Wi-Fi. It wasn't until years later I realized what he had done. Sometime before this, I had come home and walked into our room to find him in the computer of one of the neighbors on his computer. I saw a network map of all the computers in both houses. I confronted him, and he gaslit me into believing I had not seen what I thought. Some years later, I stumbled upon a GIF on a shared tablet. It was shot in our very distinct bathroom and showed my 14-year-old niece nude. I called police immediately, and he never came home again. He is currently in prison. That night, he was staying at his parents'. Police were investigating. I realized his Gmail was logged in on another tablet we shared. I could see his search history in real time. When does child pornography become a federal offense? Can a not convicted offender see their kids? What's prison like in Virginia? Daddy going to jail? How do I get my wife to come back to me? Can you plead the fifth at custody court, etc.? I've always found it extremely unnerving that he could be so tech-savvy on one side of things and so careless on the other. Story 6. I had a friend from childhood who had an eidetic memory. He never forgets anything. At primary school, he had a lot of problems because he couldn't accept that people forgot stuff and nobody had any idea that he had this ability. So if anyone got a detail wrong or something like that, he would think they were lying/trying to trick him and freak out. Wasn't till he was 15 or so that people realized what was going on. Story 7. My brother-in-law's family all have PhDs. There's his parents who have one each, then his oldest brother who's a medical doctor, and then the middle brother who has his degree in physics. His youngest sister isn't done with college yet, but she'll get one eventually. The creepy part is that they were raised in rural Washington state in a cabin in the woods. They are all super well adjusted and normal, all around awesome people. But they didn't have a TV or internet until he was well into high school. Also, they made their own clothes from recycled fabric until he got to college. Who does that? Story 8. There's certainly a better answer, but the first person that came to mind for me was Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was highly intelligent and charismatic, so much so that he was involved in politics, escaped from prison twice, and could still charm people despite being a known serial killer and arpst. That guy was truly terrifying, which is why I find people who romanticize him absolutely disgusting. Story 9. My then 4-year-old daughter. We have a long history of high intelligence plus depression, bipolar 2, on my mom's side. I did not know that mental illness was hereditary, or I may have chosen not to have bio kids of my own. I myself am afflicted with what I like to call the gene. Anyhow, I walked into the bathroom one day and my 4-year-old daughter was watching water run out of the faucet and down the drain. She was crying. I said, "Sweetie, why are you crying?" She said, "I'm never going to see any of this water again." She understood as the water was coming out of the faucet and going down the drain that it was disappearing forever, and indeed, she'd never see that water again. I made a mental note of it, and life went on. At age 6, I took her in to be evaluated for ADHD and learning disabilities. She has both, and they tested her IQ. 140, average is 100. Indeed, she suffers from depression, and by age 6 was on antidepressants. Nothing like your 7-year-old screaming, "I should just kill myself," after a long day at Disney World. So yeah, you the gene. Story 10. When I was 16, my stepdad figured out that my mom was cheating on him and secretly bugged the home phones, 1992, all landlines, and would record the calls and listen back in the garage. I spent hours of time on early BBS sites, pre-dial-up internet, which would just create hours of feedback on his recordings, or on the phone talking to my friends, boyfriends, etc. So he had to sift through epic amounts of my teen bull to get to the snippets of my mom's cheating. He also put a tracker on her car so he could follow her from a distance and figure out exactly where she was going, as long as he wasn't more than a couple miles away. It was impressive for the time. He told me later that I needed to find a job so I didn't just talk about on the phone all day. He wasn't totally wrong. Story 11. I used to drag race. One of my racing buddies is a mechanical engineer. We were at the track one day, pitted together with our cars, and were discussing gear ratios and whatnot. I was running 36-inch tall rear tires, and the car was going through the traps, finish line, at about 6,200 revolutions per minute in the 1/8 mile, at 148 miles per hour. Peak power for my engine at the time was 7,100 revolutions per minute. The idea is to get the car into the 7,100 revolutions per minute range quicker and for longer periods of time, which will make the car faster on the top end. And having more gear in it means the car would leave harder too. So I'm thinking about this and said, I wonder how many times these tires rotate when the car makes a clean 1/8 mile pass. Within 10 seconds, he said 70 1/4 revolutions. I'm like, bruh, and walked into the trailer to get my calculator. So I calculated rollout. A 36-inch tall tire will move forward 113.04 inches on a full rotation, 36 x 3.14. Convert that to feet gives you 9.42 feet, 113.04 divided by 12. Divide the length of the track by the rollout, 660 divided by 9.42, and you get 70.06. None of this is advanced math, but dude did it in his head in about 10 seconds. We've got apps to do this stuff nowadays, but it was an impressive thing to see happen. Story 12. My cousin is some kind of genius, like the kind of genius that doesn't know how to interact with humans. During a family dinner, the kids were sat at the kids' table. We were all talking about kid stuff, games, TV shows, drama at school, sports, teasing each other. Someone decided to go around the table and everyone shows their favorite video on the internet. Stuff like Vines, Reels, Shorts, etc. This dude gets his phone out and puts an hour-long brain surgery video. In the middle of us eating lamb curry, a bunch of the younger kids start retching and crying and stuff, and he stops the video but starts reciting the whole procedure. That was wrong, and what should have been done, all of it. Keep in mind he was around 11 years old. The parents come to see what's wrong, and they are just so stunned they can't stop him. An uncle, who was a surgeon, later told that everything he said was technically right, but was still under research and not practiced yet, so no one knows how he knew all that. But my younger brother still doesn't eat lamb. Story 13. I once watched my cousin with Down syndrome just start hitting golf balls at the range like he was the course pro. He went to a few of my matches growing up, and occasionally I would take him to the range with me because he loved watching me hit them and riding in the cart if I played. One day he was messing with one of my wedges, and I offered him a couple balls. By no means was he sending these hundreds of yards, considering it's a pitching wedge, but every shot was practically identical to the one before. He was consistently hitting them 80 yards, within what seemed like a 5-yard grouping. Since then, I've tried to get him to hit more balls, but he just doesn't want to. By far the most unexpected thing I've witnessed. Story 14. My husband and his dad. I've never met people who are just so capable of doing literally anything. Car broke, YouTube, got it fixed in 15 mins. Plumbing messed up, consider it done. Need to rebuild your computer, easy day. Want to build an entire house, good. Can cook literally anything and does it for fun. I always tease my husband and tell him he's got a literal gift, the ability to learn and then apply that knowledge. One time I drove over the water line in our front line and he literally fixed it. It's just crazy what people are truly capable of. My husband is geospatial intelligence in the Marines and his dad is a STEM chemistry teacher. It's like a lot of the stuff isn't even a challenge. I'd like to think that I'm pretty smart, but some of the things they do is just like, wow. Story 15. I used to know someone who would be pretty quiet around people he didn't know, only give info when asked and half of it. I took it as guarded until I got really close to him. What piqued my interest was when he said, I don't like her. She's scary smart, but plays. I dislike scary smart people like that. It's because he used to be manipulative when he was younger and admitted it while saying, I'm not like that anymore. I noticed he was always watching and reading people. He'd know who you can tell things to and who you can't. He knows who has dated who and would read people's mannerisms. He would say things like, he had trauma as a kid. That's why I was nice to him. He fake laughs after saying something, even if it's repeating what you say. It's as if he's trying to start laughter because he doesn't know how to make people genuinely laugh, but wants them to, and doesn't know how to do that other than being funny or charismatic, and even unnecessary compliments like a personal hype guy, common approval seeking traits for children who had bad family lives. That's why he talked to you about foster care, because he was probably in the system. And yeah, that dude was in the system, called out so quickly. Your stepmom probably wants to run the family instead of your dad because your dad works and she doesn't. And he doesn't want to constantly rein in the kids and grandkids. She wants some semblance of control because she doesn't work. She's a busybody with nothing to do but watch the news and send emails and texts all day. That's why she's judgmental, because she knows it's false control. But it's all she has. That was the best way to put my stepmom, a person he never met, because she's annoying ASF. And he only knew such a small amount of details about her because of what I had said to him. And he says this like it's common knowledge while drinking, as if it's all monotonous to him. Scares me to think about how he used to be manipulative. Story 16. It's when a kind of hyper-observant guy kind of read me like he knew me years and years. Kind of creepy for me since I really don't like strangers knowing me since I like being private. I was at this casual get-together, chatting with random people, when this guy I'd never met before walked up and said, You're a musician, aren't you? I was caught off guard but said I play the guitar. That's when it got weird. He smiled and said, I figured. Your fingers are calloused in a way that only happens with string instruments. And it's been a long time since you've stopped because they've toughened evenly. And your posture? It gives away how much time you spend hunched over it. I just kind of stood there stunned. I hadn't even been holding my hands in a way that would make the calluses obvious. The worst part? He said it so casually, like it was no big deal to read someone like a book. I made an excuse to leave the conversation, but for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd noticed way more about me than he let on. I still wonder how much he saw that he didn't say. Creepy. Story 17. Oh, my wife won this one. We were trying to buy 2 air purifiers for my daughter's rooms at Target. The checkout clerk rang them up as $150 each, but they were clearly priced for $50 on the Target app, which my wife was smart enough save. Clerk told her she could not honor the price and only give a discount on the first item. My wife immediately clicked buy on the app and selected in-store pickup. We then waited 20 minutes while the clerk argued with her manager and waited by customer service for pickup. Manager had to give us the items at pickup. No idea why the clerk was such a to my wife. Long story short, Target has predatory pricing. They show you one price outside the store and one piece in the store. Best Buy tries this trick too sometimes by canceling your order after telling you it's ready for pickup. Story 18. I knew a guy who could remember everything he ever read, but that's not the creepy part. Creepy part was how he wouldn't tell you. So he didn't like telling people because it becomes a game for people. What is the fifth word of the second paragraph on page 93 for this book? So anyway, anyone knew, he just wouldn't tell them. Fair, up until they pissed him off. Then it was like a court drama. On January 16, 2007, you said that John and Jane were seen flirting at the coffee shop and, quote, OMG, John is cheating on Mary with Jane again. Look through past messages and sure as the message would say that. Anyway, dude was super smart but really jaded and depressed. Fell out of touch, so IDK what he's doing now. Story 19. I was once helping my friend's mom run the daycare, and I was reading to a approximately 9-month-old, and I noticed every time I read an item on the page, for example, the frog jumped, she'd point at the frog. I eventually started making it harder and asking her where the ball is. It was another page. She'd reach, turn the page back, and show me the ball. I was pretty impressed, but I have no clue on development stages. Story 20. While getting my master's in math, my friends and I were completely struggling on a problem for the entire day. We typically score at the middle upper end of our classes, so we are no slouches. I finally gave up and asked my friend, who has a PhD in math, but has never taken this particular course, and so did not know the theorems involved. He asked me the page of the book the problem was on, took 10 minutes to read the chapter, then solved the problem with ease. The lesson learned? The top 99.99% are miles away from the top 99%. This concept applies to just about everything. In video games, the road from low GM to high GM is longer than the road from bronze to GM. While the average person player cannot tell the difference, you get to the point where you're smart, good enough to know where you stand. Story 21. I'm not saying it was creepy, but my late friend Bruce could just learn anything on a whim. Languages, history, technology, you name it. He had been running science fiction conventions for 21 years, and when he stopped, he said, I am going to become a CCIE. I heard they make a lot of money. Now, the CCIE certification is hard. Normally, it takes many years, thousands of dollars in courses, step programs, test exams, and then usually you have to fly out somewhere to take the exam. He just got some used books and got a CCNA, then a CCNP, then a CCSI within about 6-8 months. Out of knowing nothing about Cisco or modern computer networking, just ended up becoming a Cisco certified instructor in less than a year, then went to get a CCIE. I believe, like most people, he failed the first time but passed a second time from 0 to CCIE in 18 months. Companies paid top dollar for him. Some paid just to have him on their letterhead. His entire life was like that. Story 22. When I was in med school, I was tangentially friends with a guy who never showed up to uni at all. Skipped all lectures, called in sick for all lab and tutorial sessions. The night before second-year finals, he was around my house and said he had spent the last week watching every lecture at 2x speed. Dude placed top 10 out of 300 students in every exam. And mind you, it wasn't just he remembered everything, but he had a functional, lateral, applicable knowledge of all the stuff we had to know much better than most people who actually showed up. I always shuddered to think that if he applied himself, he would be a monster of a man. But dude was content to just chill. Story 23. We have a guy at work who's clearly smart, but he's also a bit of a tryhard. One of his quirks is having an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure, low-budget films and regurgitating info in a pretty arrogant way. I think The Office was talking about Wednesday, Adam's Netflix show, and that led on to him then to start spewing the entire back catalog of an obscure child actor and tidbits of their personal life. That child actor is well into her 30s now, but still, that killed the Office conversation abruptly. Story 24. I was a kid in the 80s, and my dad's best friend who worked with him came over and saw me messing around with my Commodore 64. I showed him I was working on coding it to draw a line in BASIC. This was all new, and I was excited at the time. Haha, how technology has changed. And he goes, let me make a couple adjustments on the math, and sits down, and in a few lines codes out a Mandelbrot fractal that grows and expands with overlapping fractals on my 16-color EGA monitor. This was years before I'd see something similar with Windows Line Screensaver. I know fractals are somewhat straightforward for those that know the math, But to be able to sit down out of the blue and do this in a few minutes required a level of skills and knowledge that blow me away, especially done as a one-off for a kid. It really inspired me. He was also the one that told me that the reason we haven't found extraterrestrial life is because of time, not space, like putting a person in Hawaii, Florida, and giving them 5 minutes to find each other. He spent his later years consulting for Apple, basically doing what he liked working on, and now is retired and long-haired playing bass and guitar in lounges most evenings. Story 25. My 6-year-old daughter sometimes does or says something out of nowhere that just shocks us. She has this cute little voice. She is super cute and giggly, and will act like she can't do anything for herself. Now I wonder if she does it on purpose. Examples include reading a difficult sentence my son was trying to sound out just by glancing at it, and then denies ever doing it. When she was 4, she knew exactly how many people would fit into each car for a family reunion trip to a restaurant within seconds, while the adults were stressing over who goes to which car. She was right. I'm from Italy, and I speak Italian to my mom and Nonna all the time on the phone, but I speak English to my kids, and I thought they didn't know Italian. My son can't understand it very well, but apparently she can. I know this because my mom was telling me about getting my kids bikes for Christmas, and my daughter gasped and looked excited for a second. But then when she realized that she reacted, she denied ever doing it or knowing about the bikes. My mom and I were speaking in Italian, so the kids wouldn't have their surprise spoiled. Oh well. Her basic math skills are better than mine. She can do a lot of it in her head, even if she still can't explain how she got the answers. Granted, I have dyscalculia, but still. Story 26. So I have been told that this is worrying and I should not bring it up in conversation. I drive a garbage truck in the town that I live in. I've been doing it for about 5 years. My route is loaded on a tablet where I have customers' names and addresses. It's an average route, so in a given week, I'm driving past almost 5,000 houses. My brain gets bored as I'm doing my job. Doesn't matter how many podcasts or audiobooks I listen to during my shifts. So I look at the names. Some are dull, like a Jones or a Smith, and some aren't. Over time, some of them stick in my head, and I remember what their names are. Couple that with what cars are in the driveway, and I start noticing them around town. Now, here's the part my wife tells me I'm supposed to stop doing because it's creepy. My kids are older, and I will take them to their extracurriculars. While I'm there, I chat with everyone. I used to be in sales, so conversations are how I pass the time. Usually at the beginning of the conversation, I hear their name, and I would casually mention which car in the lot was theirs. I'm also a car guy, so I like it when people recognize my car. If I didn't know the car, I would ask them if they lived in a certain neighborhood. Not exact streets or house numbers because I knew that would be odd, but just neighborhoods. Long story short, people talk to my wife, and I keep to myself or don't go anymore. TLDR, my job showed me that I should just stay home. Story 27. This isn't so much creepy as awesome. My father's a doctor, retired allergist, former pediatrician. When my first child was born, he was turning blue when he cried, and the doctors didn't know why. So they transferred him to another hospital with a world-class NICU. The doctor there diagnosed him with polycythemia, too many red blood cells, and said the treatment was a partial transfusion. Basically, they were going to take out some blood and replace it with saline to just thin it out. The doctor came in and spoke to my father, who introduced himself as a pediatrician and the grandfather, and explained how much blood they were going to take out. I don't remember the numbers, but my father started muttering to himself. Okay, how much does the baby weigh? That means he has this many ounces of blood. Okay, and his numbers were that, okay, and they need to be here. That's this percentage. Blood needs to be thinned to this, multiplied by this. Okay, so that means he needs to take out 6 cc's of blood. How much did he say he was taking out? 4? Okay, good. He's being conservative. He can always take out more later. I was in awe. He was doing complex medical calculations in his head and validated what the doctor was doing. They did end up doing a second transfusion, but after that, all was well. Story 28. I never saw it as intelligence, but I've freaked a lot of people out being able to name a time, date, and place to some obscure random thing they told me up to decades ago, and it made them act weird. I over-remember whatever that's about, and I've seen people's reactions when they realized I not only heard them, but memorized a talk with them years prior as I laid out the previous conversation to them. It's actually a curse more than a gift. It also has me know who's lied about things, which is why it's so cursed, because they will take you down while refusing it never happened. I'm getting tested for autism soon. Story 29. A friend of mine will just come up with an idea or see something she wants to replicate, fabricate all the parts in her garage, program all the electronics involved, and have a working prototype same day. And it will be better than whatever she's copying or what you can get in the store. She'll rapidly learn how to use machines and systems that take other people years to master. Charging system doesn't have a speaker available? She'll hack it and make the motors sing it. It's pretty humbling. Story 30. I'm not sure what kind of intelligence it is, but for me it's my dad. It's not creepy in the traditional sense, but he can walk into a room, I mean any room, and in under 15 minutes he's found someone he either knows from years ago or has some connection to. Example, while on vacation in Mexico, he found several people who were either from his general area growing up or who knew his immediate family in some way or another. It's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon with him. I swear if he wanted, he could get a person's bank security questions out of them without trying. Story 31. At my call hospital, we have this nurse that we call Dr. Bob. Anything that any nurse in the medical ICU doesn't know, we just ask Dr. Bob. When we do our rounds with the medical residents and they are not sure about anything on the patient's diagnosis or what type of medication to give or if it's compatible, they turn to Dr. Bob for answers. The attending doctors talk to his about a patient's and diseases like he was one of his colleagues. We often ask him why he is not a doctor, but he says he doesn't want to be on call all the time. He likes to disconnect and not be bothered. He likes to code, play around with AI, loves to 3D print stuff. He has a shop where he machine metal parts, etc. He likes photography and all the technical details. Very impressive and chill guy. Story 32. A very intelligent sociopath. Everything was calculated, and usually he was right. The reason I found out? One day we did mushrooms together, and evidently the chemicals tore down some walls, and he told me that he manipulated me into our friendship. He had basically stalked me until he knew what I liked and then pretended to like the same things. He said he does this with everyone. He studies them for a while from afar, figures out what makes them tick, and then exploits it so he can get what he wants. Story 33. I knew a kid who was so good at math in middle school that he started taking high school level classes. On its own, not that creepy. But he was taking AP classes and earning college credits off of them while he was in middle school. On its own, while definitely an outlier, it's still not that creepy. Now here's the creepy part. He got enough college credits that he got a college minor in math off of AP credits alone before he even started high school. That's creepy. Unfortunately, he was kind of a one-trick pony. While he was incredibly good with mathematics, his skills in other school subjects left much to be desired. Story 34. I knew a guy who was faster than calculator and could calculate bigger numbers than calculator could show. Square roots and exponents and so on. He was supposedly a bit autistic savant, and his social skills were bad, and also his motorical functions, as in movements, were shaky, but his brain went inhuman with numbers. If everyone could calculate in that level, we would be already all over the universe conquering planets. Story 35. I can remember minute details about things I'm interested in, and one of those things is cars. It served me well when I worked in the repair industry. I wouldn't remember your name, but when you drove your car onto the lot, I knew who you were and what we'd done to it. So what happens now is we're co-workers, and I see you get out of your car at work. Now I know which car is yours. Now I know if you're at work or not when I arrive and leave. Now when I pull into a store parking lot, I know if you're inside. If I happen to be in your neighborhood, now I know where you live if you park outside, and now whenever I pass by, I know if you're home or not. I don't do anything with that info other than say to myself, oh, so-and-so's at Costco too, or so-and-so beat me into work today, but I realize it's creepy AF. I don't make an effort to do it, it just happens. Story 36. My nephews and I were playing in the basement. 2 of them fight over a toy and I separate them. Minutes later, the 4-year-old casually leans against the wall by the light switch, turns off the lights and runs at his 7-year-old brother. He punches him in the face and runs back to turn the light on, pretending like he didn't just assault his brother. I chew him out saying, "You punched your brother." He replies, "It was dark, you didn't see me do it." Premeditated assault at 4 years old. I'm a bit nervous about how clever and charming he can be. Next theme. What's the fastest you've ever seen someone burn through a big lump sum of money? Story 1. I work in a casino. I see insane amounts gone in seconds. My Phil got $30K in a settlement, and it was gone in a week with nothing to show for it. That man couldn't hold a dollar for more than a minute. Story 2. A coworker got an $11K inheritance from his dad, whom he hated. He took his 2 best friends and they spent it in one night at the Reeperbahn Red Light District in Hamburg, Germany. It was a conscious decision. He's usually a stingy guy. I kind of respect him for it, to be honest. Story 3. A guy I went to college with got hit by a drunk driving police officer. He went through the windscreen and ended up in the passenger seat. About a mile down the road, the officer pulled over and dragged him out of the car, saying he couldn't put up with his complaining no more and left him in a ditch on the side of the road. It was hours before my friend was found. He ended up getting multiple plates and screws on his bones and spending a long time in hospital. He got a substantial settlement, which the judge remarked Needs to see him through his old age, as the injuries he sustained will impact his life as he gets older. I was young at the time, but the settlement seemed huge to me. It was just about enough to buy a 5-bedroom townhouse in the city where we lived. Friend proceeded to follow his sports team on an international tour, flying first class, and took his girlfriend with him, bought a 7K sound system, brand new computer, lived the high life for all to see. Went on international travel to multiple countries to see relatives he barely knew. Fast forward 2 years, I got a call from him. He was looking for the $25 I borrowed from him. I did owe it to him, so I arranged to meet him and give it back to him. All the money was gone, nothing to show for it. Story 4. I knew of a kid from high school who got $1 million inheritance from his grandmother when she passed. It was a few years into college, and I guess grandma skipped his parents and gave it straight to him to stick it to them or something. Anyway, he bought a $600K car and crashed it somewhere along the entrance of the Golden Gate Bridge. Then a week later, he bought a $200K car and crashed that one in like 3 days. I don't know how he kept his license, but all the money was gone in a month. No one ever heard from him after that, just disappeared into the ether. Oh, and I forgot this one very important detail. When he got the money, he quit college and his job immediately. He burned every bridge in his life, friends and family, like they were a book of matches. People tried to help him, but there was just no stopping him. Story 5. A manager at U-Haul in my area that I worked at 16 years ago won $2 million on a scratch-off. He quit immediately. He bought his girlfriend a brand new high-priced BMW. She wrecked it within a few weeks, and he bought her a new one. He bought all kinds of extravagant stuff. She was blowing his money like crazy, going out on shopping sprees with her friend. Within that same year, he was broke. His girlfriend left him, and he was back working at U-Haul. Story 6. I sold my first house for nearly double what we paid for it. After everything was said and done, I walked away with about $200K in the bank. Good news, paid off a lot of credit card debt, freed up about $1K a month in minimum payments, was able to finance my interstate move, and bought new floors for my house. Bad news, yeah. It's almost all gone. Took less than a week grand total time to zip through all that money. Definitely went toward a lot of good quality of life items, but it's staggering how fast it can vanish. Story 720K Army re-enlistment bonus hit on a Friday. No clue what it was post-tax, broke by Monday. I'm getting divorced and they can only take your money, not you *T. He would later try to speed up the divorce by getting married in another state because thought it would cancel it out. Then when he turned the paperwork in, the Army ended up charging him with polygamy. Story 820 plus years ago, I had a friend who was, I guess the polite way to phrase it, a free spirit. He was always looking for the next thrill or get rich quick without actually having to work opportunity. His parents were well off and he would always end up back at home when the inevitable crash would happen. This went on until he was about 30 when his parents finally got sick of supporting him. So gave him $250,000 and told him it was his inheritance and that he was not to return home or ask them for another dime ever. He took the money and moved to Oregon to start over. 18 months later, he was at my doorstep with a 6-month-old son and dead broke again. I let him crash for a week or so until he moved in with another friend, but he would constantly hit me up for money and finally had to cut ties with him. I still feel BD about sometimes, but I couldn't not afford to support my own family and him. Found out a few years ago he finally settled down, got married, has a decent job, and reconciled with his parents. Guess it just takes some a little longer than others. Story 9. I didn't actually see it happen, but was working on a business's computers, and clients would always approach me for assistance, although I couldn't help them. I'd send them to a different computer with an actual employee. I did this one day, as I do often, and one of turned business owners came by and asked me if I knew who it was. Dude was in furry work clothes and looked like any other slub. After the question, owner walked away, leaving me puzzled, but I had to do. A couple minutes later, owner came back with a national magazine article about the guy. Seems he won a large lottery prize, $10 million, and was back to being poor a few years later. Seems his brother-in-law had some great investments for him that managed to move millions into BIL's bank account very effectively, and guy had signed the contracts that basically gave him nothing for the investment. Story 10 worked W a guy that got like a $100K payout after crushing his leg at his last job. He spent like $4K a month on weed. His daily routine was to go hit all the dispensaries he could before his shift started, smoke half of it and decide he hated it, then just go buy more. I'd call him a liar, but he used to give me a half-gallon Ziploc bag full of half-smoked dispo carts at the end of every month, lol. It had been maybe 2 or 3 years since the payout when I met him. He started working at my job because he no longer had enough in the account to support himself. Story 11. A kid in my high school was in a car accident and got an insurance payout of like $150K. I guess his parents let him have it and put no restrictions on him spending it. Whatever it was that a high school kid in 2004 might want, that kid had it. There was always something new. He started getting cars, then he was really into auto shop class, so he was buying junker classic cars and trying to trick them out and put Gucci interior in and all. He gave up on that and spent the last of the money on a Chrysler 300. They were cool then. He blew it all before high school was over, but he did drive his 300 till he graduated. He came from a poor-ish family, and as far as I know, he's poor-ish now too. Story 12. I've personally watched someone extremely close to me piss away a $250K inheritance in just 3 years while having no real expenses of their own. Cause their husband covers literally everything. They spent it on Uber Eats, weed, TikTok garbage, random spending sprees, hair, nails, lashes, etc., etc. Not a single contribution to the household. She has less than $10K left of the money that if she invested it wisely, she could have made significant gains in 3 years. Meanwhile, this person has 2 small children that don't have a college fund because their husband basically lives paycheck to paycheck to keep the household going and pay all the bills, buy all the groceries, etc., and takes care of the things the kids need, and he provides her with cash for things she needs. They're getting divorced, so good for him at least. Story 13. My sister and her husband. When his dad was dying of cancer, he got a few of those guaranteed coverage life insurance policies and made the 2 of them the beneficiaries. They never mentioned the exact amount of money that they got, but it was over $250K. This was over 12 years ago. Now, $250K 12 years ago. That would have instantly bought you a decent house. Back then in this area, $80K could have gotten you a 3-bedroom house. And keep in mind that they had 2 kids, and they were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. Had they done this, no one would have blamed them. No one would have said that they did a bad thing. This would have been the smartest thing possible to do. Instead, they blew the entire amount. No house, no new or newer car. Her husband was unemployed because he is a lazy motherer, and while he could have used this money to go to a trade school and learn a trade, which I would have supported 100%, they blew it on toys, fast food, video games, movies, candy, and other. In less than a year, they were broke and had nothing to show for it, and did so in under 10 months. My sister is now 44 years old. Her marriage ended when he put her in the hospital and he went to jail about 7 years ago. She has been living with our mother ever since, as well as her 2 kids. Everything my sister owns fits inside of her bedroom. The bulk of what she had when she was married was lost due to her being evicted, and instead of packing up her stuff so we could move her out of her apartment and into a storage unit, she spent that week watching movies and playing video games, expecting us to pack her up her 4. But nothing she had was really worth keeping. There was no really nice furniture. And this wasn't the apartment that they were living in when they got the money. It was a different apartment that they were evicted from 5 months earlier. My sister is the one person who I would never loan or give money to. Like I said, she is 44 years old and lives with our mother, and everything she owns fits inside her bedroom. She works as a receptionist, and even though she does not help out with rent or utilities or food, she has no money. She has new movies, new video games, a new cell phone once a year or so, but she doesn't have the money to help out with the living expenses around the house. We all know that when her kids move out, and it will be soon as the youngest got accepted to college and the oldest is just hanging around to protect her little sister, Mom will be telling my sister to move out. If my sister doesn't learn how quickly to manage her money, she will be homeless. Oh, and if you're thinking, okay, your sister just needs to listen to Dave Ramsey or some other financial person or go to a financial planner, you're wasting your time. My sister firmly believes that no matter what you see, no matter what you think, she knows best and that you need to listen to her. Or she will say, those people don't work, they are just scammers. In short, she will not seek or accept help unless you are handing her cash. If her finances and ability to manage them were a ship, it would be that submarine that was poorly crafted that instantly killed the pilot and passengers when it imploded over a year and a half ago.